Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
And at the end.
Hi.
Hello. We have Santa up on the rooftop.
Yeah, you might actually hear it. I don't know. My husband's up on the roof decorating. It's going to be up there for, well, he'll leave it up for fucking ever is what he'll do, so.
What is he putting up there?
The sleigh and stuff. It's all the Christmas decorations.
I have to tell you, when I was driving over here today, I turned onto your street and gasped in delight aloud because your Christmas decorations are out.
Yeah.
And I could see them.
They're late.
Well, I haven't been here in a couple of weeks, so.
Well, because we left for Mexico right after Thanksgiving. So.
And then I went to West Virginia.
Right.
Out of the clear blue sky. You get back. Hi, I'm going to be out of town. So.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Right.
So we have an exciting change to tell people about.
I don't know if they'll be excited.
We're very excited about it.
We are changing the format a little bit, and so there'll be some surprises coming up with that, but also we'll be switching to one episode a month, at least for a while, and it'll be on the 15th of each month. That is when it'll come out, the 15th of each month, to keep that consistent. And so we'll be trying to make those a little bit longer so that there's a little more in the one episode, and you can space it out if you want to and all that good stuff. So there'll be more on that in the new year, but we just wanted to give you a heads up.
Yes.
This is in lieu of canceling because I got a lot of shit that I do, and
you do.
It takes a lot to do all of this and to do the editing and to try and do social media. So our social media is probably going to be lacking because I'm giving myself permission to not kill myself anymore. So that's what's been arrived at there, but we are still going to put it out and have fun.
And Shannon is the reason I don't sound like a gibbering idiot every week, because she goes in and edits the real idiot bits out.
It's okay. There's not a bunch of big idiot bits. That's a over self-flagellation that you're okay. It's not that bad.
I watched you edit one time, and I was like, I don't
want to hear this anymore.
I was self-conscious for probably 3 months about every sound that came out of my mouth. Every tick, every click, every smack, every hum or or
right.
And I just thought I should not speak anymore.
You're like, I'm just going to stop talking. I don't like it. Whereas that's how I felt in the beginning when I had to self-edit, and then I was like, ugh. And then, so you improve real fast when you have to listen to yourself every single week multiple times, because it's usually not just one, like, run through.
No.
To do that. Oh, but anyway, yeah. So, there's that. And again, we'll have more on that soon. But,
yes,
that's our heads up to you. Probably a little later than we intended, but we had to figure out what we were doing.
Yes.
So, there was that. So, yes. So, I went to Mexico. And so United doesn't have first class anymore, or maybe only select planes do, but they have business class. And we upgraded to business class because both times we were able to find a deal, like just keep checking and find a deal and do it. So on the way there, that was like, no big deal. We couldn't sit together, but we figured we're going to be together for a whole week.
Right.
So we're good. And so we just like split up and had the different business class. But they spoil you on it like it's first class. So it's like it's a combo now, right? And so like when we first got on, there was champagne.
Yeah.
And then like we could have free alcohol and whatever. We didn't because neither of us are that person, but we could have because on the way back we got on though, and it was like a jumbo jet or something. It was a huge one compared to what we'd flown out there in. And so business class was it was like a movie, like it was completely separated. You turned right to go back to the normal people section. You turned left to go up to the business class section.
Wow.
And the galley was there in between and all this stuff. So like it was completely separated. They were like, you are better than, I don't know. But nope, you paid more. But yes. And anyways, the seats were huge and they were full recline because it was on an international plane. So you could lay it down and make a complete bed with it. Which meant that I kept pushing Jeffrey's because our controls were in between us. So, like, he'd say something smart-ass like he does, and then I would just look at him intensely in the eyes and just push the button while he slowly slid down. And then he would push it back up and sit up, and then he'd say something else. Then I'll have to push the button. But yeah, that was amazing. I was like, I want to fly like that every time. I can't, but I want to fly like that every time.
It spoils you.
If I ever fly international, I'm going to have to save up some big bucks to try and do that.
We did it when we went to Hawaii. We upgraded because it's a long flight, and we were like, we're gonna. And it was funny because on the way there, you got treated special. On the way back, they were like, sit down and shut up. They did not give a shit on the way back. Wow. But on the way there, they were very nice. I mean, the attendant comes over and is like, I think Joe had told her it was our anniversary. She wanted to take our picture. Give me your phone so I can take your picture together. And I was just like, okay.
Something just fell off of the roof, and I was like, shit, is that my husband? But it was white, and he was wearing a gray shirt. So hopefully it wasn't.
I think
you were talking, and out the corner of my eye, just what?
I think we would have heard.
He at the very least would say, I'm okay. Like he does.
Or it would have been, ah! As he fell. Or there would have been a lot of swearing.
It would have been a heavier hit.
So
than whatever light thing he threw down.
When I flew to West Virginia, so regular plane to Chicago, but I don't think the airport in Charleston, West Virginia is on a top of a mountain, and it's just, if you miss the runway, you're falling off the side of the mountain. So the boarding area for the flight to West Virginia is the size of your office, roughly. And I got on it and I was like, I am on a Barbie plane. It is not pink, but it was kind of small.
I guess not a lot of people are flying to West Virginia.
I guess not as many. No. That is what I assumed. But
well, yeah.
It was not as exotic as Mexico. It was a little exotic, but not as exotic.
I loved Mexico. I did not love walking down that main avenue. It's like, because that's where everybody's like, come into my store. And the big thing that they were saying, it was stuff like, don't you remember me? I was your waiter at the hotel. But they would all say that line.
Oh.
The last guy that did it said it to me. I just went, at him. I was so done at that point. I don't like being sold to by anybody. I don't like going into a furniture store because I know they're going to approach me. I don't like going to a car lot. I cannot handle somebody coming at me to sell me something. I'm like, if I want help, I will ask you for help. And of course, I was telling myself that I was like, we've created this. Mm-hmm. We tourists have created this situation for them where this is how they're making their money. Because we've basically moved into this city and just made it a tourist destination. Yeah. So it's on us. But I still don't want to deal with it. Because my reaction is to respond to people politely when they, right? And by the end, I was like, I'm just not going to look at you. But then I was posting the funny thing because one of them was like, she's making the run for it, he calls after me. Because I was just like, boom. Straightforward. Because
I am the type of person, I do like to make eye contact with people.
Right. I do as well.
When you're walking down the street, you let them know, I see you.
Right.
But it's also, I'm just looking around, gawking, and...
So then I'll say this, after a week of dealing with this, the very last night, we'd done a catamaran sunset cruise, and it was supposed to be the Friday, and it got canceled for weather, and it was very choppy. I could see it made sense. The water was choppy just watching from our hotel, our Airbnb. So anyway, it got rescheduled to Sunday, which I did not want to do because I was pretty sure I was going to get seasick. And we were flying the next day, and I get airsick and car sick. And yes, I have vertigo and all sorts of motion issues. So, but I wasn't going to cancel it. I was down there to have that experience. So we went on it. I got seasick. I did not throw up, for the record. Boy, I might have felt better if I had, though. And so after a certain point, I was having so much fun at the beginning. It was but the seas were still choppy. It was still really not great out there. So a couple other people got seasick too. And so everybody else is enjoying this delightful charcuterie board. It was gorgeous. It was absolutely beautiful. There were shrimp on it. Like, this wasn't your bullshit. And all Jeff and I could eat were the crackers that came with it. But anyway, it was just me sitting there staring at the horizon and breathing deeply in through my nose and out through my mouth. Yep. And doing that for like an hour and a half. Because I got sick about 20 to 30 minutes into the cruise.
Oh.
I got some great pictures beforehand. It was me moving around to take pictures that made it worse, probably. And I was soaked, which was fun because nobody else sat on the nets. I was like, why go on a catamaran if you're not going to sit on the net and like experience it?
Yeah.
So absolutely soaked. So we get out of the car and we're walking. My dress was still just like dripping everywhere because we had a shuttle. But so that night, instead of trying a restaurant, like a gorgeous restaurant like we were every other night there, we were like, let's go to the Hard Rock and get fries and burgers because like we both just wanted that sitting on our stomach.
Something
Yes. And so we're walking down there and but when we were walking back, it was, you could see how exhausted everybody was. All these people who'd been doing that all day. I felt so bad for these people because they weren't even trying anymore. They were standing there like they're supposed to because I saw people like, if they weren't doing that, then they would get talked to and told to do it. Like the people who, yeah. And we passed this one guy and he's sitting in a chair and he's got his hand like resting on the armrest and his face and he just looked like drained. And then we walked by another woman who's leaning against the wall and she's yawning. And I just felt so bad for these people that I kind of wanted to like punch or something during the day when and it's not, they'll keep following you, right? Like you can't just walk past and it's a sensory nightmare on that avenue for somebody who has sensory issues and people issues and stuff. But I never forgot that it was people I was dealing with or that it was that we've made it that way. But I still didn't like it. I cannot both not like it and empathize with these people. Yes. But that at the very end was just like, I needed to see that before I left and see these poor drained people and know that tomorrow they were going to set up early and be going late into the night.
Well, it's exhausting. Being on your feet all day on the pavement is exhausting.
And trying to sell to these people because it's your livelihood and there's 5 billion other stores exactly like this one.
Yep.
Like one guy, he was the real salesperson who was walking by and he was like, I have different things than the other stores. It's different in there. Like he had figured that out. But yeah, no. And I'm a little sad because one of those Dick Waffle places was there.
Dick Waffle?
Have you ever seen, there's like video online?
I have, I'm like, no. What are you talking about?
So they make you, it's a penis shaped waffle. They also had, we'll call it a labia or whatever, like waffle.
Oh my God, a twat waffle?
Yes. So you go in there and you get it and they have like soft serve ice cream with it and stuff, but they do a decoration and if it's
of course
like the online place, they do a whole little performance while they're making this for you and they like to come out and make you like, do weird things with it, which would not work for me.
No, that would not work for me either.
So I was like, I feel like I should go into a place like that and experience it because they're not everywhere right now.
That's true.
But that was after the seasickness and Hard Rock, and we left Hard Rock, and we were like, oh, God, no. I was like, I can't. I'm not going to go buy it. Just throw it away.
Did you see, it was on one of your posts on Facebook, two people got arguing?
Yes.
I was like, that got heated fast.
I still don't even fully understand. I think somebody deleted one of their comments. And that's why, because then there was like a response to it all bitchy, but it was not there anymore. And then they like finished each other off, I guess. And I was like, all right, I'm just moving on from that.
I was so shocked because that was about it was a very funny little thing about this woman accidentally bought penis-shaped pasta and fed it to her children.
Yeah.
And because upside down, it looked like a goofy little happy face. This is dried pasta, you understand, and it's supposed to be comical anyway. So then, of course, she got home, cooked it, and it flipped around, and she got a good look at it. She was serving it
to her two toddlers, basically.
Yeah, like a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old. And she was just horrified that she had done this. So two people on your wall just got into it. One was like...
Yeah, because they had used the word mum in the post, and so one of them was like, maybe it's just on the shelves normal in England or wherever they did this, and somehow, and again, there was a missing comment between them that had been deleted. Another one was like, I know what mum indicates, but thank you for breaking it down for me. And so on and so forth. And I was like, what a weird fucking thing. Like, I can post anything without somebody coming at me or somebody else?
I think they might have even used white heteronormative in their response. And I was just like, oh my God. But then I love Becky's response. She said when she and Wes, and I can't remember who else, were visiting Italy.
They giggle.
She was like, we saw that pasta everywhere. We giggled every time we saw it. And I was like, that's the response you wanted.
Right.
Not
some weird ass fight over the word mum and its etymological origins. Etymological, whatever. I don't care. I was like, I'm not touching this. If you guys want to fight each other, you fight each other. But I didn't post this for some weird ass fucking. I don't give a shit.
We have another friend who I will not name. I don't know if I would even say friend or a mutual acquaintance who occasionally over-explains things.
Yeah.
And I go, just stop. It's not offensive, but it is very much over-explained.
I have several people on there that'll do it. And like I asked what was really a rhetorical question. And so I posted some rhetorical question. And not one, but two people told me why. And I was like, I'm not fucking stupid. That's why these responses bother me, because I'm like, I'm not stupid. Everybody else read the room.
Yeah.
Except for you, who thought I needed an explanation. Fuck off.
You just put the right inflection in that fuck off. You sounded so tired.
I am
so exhausted.
tired. I'm just like, it's social media. I'm here for fun.
Yes.
And I don't understand why you guys aren't.
Who did I just silenced somebody else for 30 days today. And I can't remember who. But I looked at it and I thought, no, I don't have the spoons for this. Just
doesn't toss them.
Although and now my problem is I see people like somebody had a birthday today. And I looked at that and I thought, who the fuck is that? I have no idea who this person is. But we have like 53 friends in common. I assume it's somebody in the writing community.
Uh-huh.
That is but I don't know. I'm pretty sure. But I was just like.
It happens to me all the time. But there's some of those people that I don't know in real life are some of the like most fun, pleasurable people to have on my page.
Yes.
You know? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not getting rid of you. I don't really know who you are, but we have good conversations and you laugh at the right things and I laugh at the things you post.
Those I keep.
We are there for those kinds of friends.
Yes. Those I keep, of course. Anybody who can make me laugh, that's, you know, that's the whole thing. If you can make me laugh, and that's a really low bar, by the way. I sometimes have the sense of humor of a 10-year-old boy.
Right.
Tell me a fart joke and I'll follow you anywhere.
I'm on there wanting to be entertained.
Yes.
And therefore I'm going to be easy to entertain.
Yes.
It's not that hard. But then there's some, it's all political all the time. And then there's, and I'm like, why are you social media? And this is not social media. That's not what you're supposed to do. Stop it. But yeah, no, I've got a couple people who've gotten so tired of being caught by the bots for things that they didn't actually do wrong, that one of them recently posted, it's a famous set of like artwork that's on postcards, and it's cherubic, it's women, rubicund women and cherubs. And so she posted an old one, and I've seen it a billion times, and it's this woman kind of reclining, rubicund again, and there's a cherub holding a bubble wand to her butt, and there's right?
See, that got me.
She got in trouble, and they told her it was because it was like child exploitation or child victimization or something. And she was like, I'm actually super offended that now I've been accused basically by the algorithm or whatever. And she got shut down for it. And then she fought it, and then they gave her stuff back. But
today I tried to post The 12 Days of Christmas by Bob and Doug McKenzie. It was in my memory, so I just tried to share it, and it says, this violates community standards. And I looked at that, and I thought, how? So I found I just posted it as I posted the video because, you know, and a beer in a tree.
It's better than what is it? There's some meme that's going around. They've added up all the birds given to the person. They're like, how are you enjoying the 53 bird, you know, whatever the number is, birds that I gave you over the 12 days of Christmas. It's ridiculous. But yeah, it's impossible not to get shut down for something. So I have these people who've just been like, fuck it. And so all they do is post stuff that they're like, am I going to get shit done for this? How about this? How about this? And so those ones just keep me rolling because they're posting all the stuff the rest of us are afraid to do because I gotta have my social media because I got a book coming out in the spring, you know?
Exactly.
So, shit.
Exactly. I'm going
Yes,
first.
you first.
Okay. Whoops. Let me get my notes. We sit here and talk about before we start what order we're doing things in, and then I open my mouth and my brain falls out of my ass, and I don't know what happens.
It's the mesh chair.
That's it. That must
it
be
trickles
it.
out.
So I really wanted to start this episode by asking, do you know the Muffin Man? Have you seen this going around? Okay, my friend Lindsay sent me this TikTok video that claimed the Muffin Man was actually a baker named Frederick Thomas Linwood who lured children away from their homes and killed them. He was also purported to have killed 7 rival bakers, drowning one in brownie batter, which I don't even think brownies were a thing back then, and killing others with a sharpened wooden spoon. Like I said, this came from my friend Lindsay, and I got so goddamn excited about this, and I'm researching it, and there is no historical evidence to back it up. And I looked, and I looked, and I looked. Now, it was on Medium, but Medium just publishes frickin' anything and everything. But nobody in Medium, there were 0 sources cited. So, I was all so psyched for it. I was just, would have been so good.
I know. I've had a few of those where I'm like, this is going to be a great story. Why haven't I heard of this before? And then I'm like, because it doesn't exist.
It is not true. Yeah.
Just, how dare you excite me that way?
Yes. So, next on my list, I thought, as I just mentioned earlier, I went to West Virginia. So I'm like, let's go look at West Virginia again and see what they got good. I've decided nothing looks spookier than Charleston, West Virginia in the winter daylight, because there's just, the leaves are all off the trees. So they're just, and it's thickly wooded. I mean, freaking everywhere that's not the city, there's a lot of trees, but they're just these like skeletal trees right now. And with all the greenery gone, you can see these big jagged chunks of black rocks sticking out of the side of the hill, or it's just a very spooky looking place to me. I mean, it's leaning over the roads from the ridges, and I swear to God, when we were on our way to the airport pre-dawn, so I could come back to Colorado, I think we drove through a ghost. Nobody else thinks so, but I do. I don't care. It was a mist. It was just like person-sized floating in the road. There was nothing else near it. There was no fog. It was just this one little blob of mist. And I went, I just drove through a ghost. And they're like, did you hit your head getting into the car? So anyway, here we go. There's plenty to talk about. I did not get to see the Mothman statue, but next time. Right. I didn't plan ahead well enough. But it is on the agenda. I have put it on the agenda for the next visit. So I decided to just go with the serial killer. So Herman Drenthe was born in the Netherlands in 1893. So in 1910, at the age of 17, he immigrated to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Then in 1926, he moved to West Virginia, as one does. And at some point, he Americanized his name to Harry F. Powers. And I did find records that he served in World War I. And he was sent overseas, so... In 1927, he responded to a Lonely Hearts ad. So I'm going to do a little segue because this just fascinates me. The whole concept, because everybody knows about Tinder and what are all those stupid dating sites called even?
I don't know.
Old married women don't go on.
Yeah, right.
Not that we'll admit to.
Yeah, I once told my husband I kind of wanted to like just go on and like
see what they were like,
to see what it was like and like see what people wrote to me and stuff. And I'm not saying I'll never do it, but I've not done it yet. I'll tell you guys all about it if I do it.
Yeah. So Lonely Hearts ads were the earliest version of personal ads. They were placed in newspapers, and the goal was usually, back then it was matrimony. I mean, now it seems to just be hooking up, but back then it was matrimony. They were heavily parodied and satirized in newspapers. There were almost as many newspapers making fun of them as there were newspapers running them. It's believed that the first genuine personal ad in the U.S. was placed in February of 1759 in the Boston Evening Post. In 1840, an editorial in Philadelphia's Public Ledger claimed that most ads received between 25 and 500 replies on average. And I'm like, so shit, nothing is new. Nothing we do is new. It was scandalous. It was considered scandalous for a woman to place an ad or answer an ad because of the double standard. We always have to have that. However, that changed during the Civil War when soldiers started placing ads looking for women to correspond with. And then it was considered patriotic to answer the ads. In magazines that catered to such ads, oh, this one kills me, you'd find pages, and this is a quote, packed with announcements of red-hot photographs, vigor tablets, bus developers, sex secrets, aphrodisiacs, and contraceptives.
All right.
I don't know why. Anyway, back to Harry. He answered an ad that Luella Struther placed. Luella owned both a farm and the Quincy Street grocery, and Harry, who was a traveling vacuum salesman, was so impressed that he married Luella and moved to a town called Quiet Dell, West Virginia.
Sounds quiet.
It is. He thought the idea of the ads was so swell that he decided to place some of his own. Yes, despite the fact that he was already married. The responses poured in at a rate of 10 to 20 letters per day. And the Postal Service has verified that. He was getting 10 to 20 responses a day. In a report called The Literature of the American Serial Killer, written in 1988, researcher Patterson Smith said he had an original letter written by Powers to one of his potential mates. In it, Powers said he was longing for someone to take his former wife's place in my heart, and he promised to give his next gal anything within reason that money can buy. He also claimed he was 5'7" with clear blue eyes and medium dark hair. So later, Time magazine called him a fat, beady-eyed, flabby little man.
Wow.
And according to his execution order, he was 5'3" and 187 pounds and gray at the temples.
That's not that heavy. Jeez.
But yeah.
It was a live course, but
while not much of a looker, he was reputed to be a sweet talker with a piercing gaze.
Because it was,
behind his eyeglasses.
Clear blue eyes.
Yeah, that was the draw. It wasn't the money. That wasn't it at all. So Harry was keeping busy around the house this whole time while he's placing the ads. What a good homeowner he was. He added a garage.
A garage? You weren't even visiting someplace where that should have happened. A garage.
I don't know who would say that.
Go out into the garage.
The garage.
The garage.
Okay.
Get me a tea and pay.
Okay. He added a garage and a basement under the garage to his home. Cue the ominous music. Apparently home improvements just always have sinister undertones.
Like, why do you need that? What are you going to do with it? Why is it underground?
The wording from one of Harry's ads. Wealthy widower worth $150,000 with income from $400 to $3,000 per month, civil engineer and a very fine-looking man of 38 writes, "My business enterprises prevent me from making many social friends. I am therefore unable to make the acquaintance of the right kind of woman. As my properties are located through the Middle West, I believe I will settle there when married. Am an elk and a mason. Own a beautiful 10-room house completely furnished. My wife would have her own car and plenty of spending money, but she must be strictly a one-man woman. I would not tolerate infidelity. Am now living in West Virginia. Contact Cornelius O. Pearson and address in Clarksburg, West Virginia." So, gets married, builds a dungeon, starts placing personal ads. He began corresponding with Asta Eicher, using the name of Cornelius Pearson. Eicher was widowed. She was a mother of 3 and was living in Park Ridge, Illinois. So as Pearson, he went to visit Eicher and her children in June of 1931, and he was around long enough to be known in the neighborhood and to meet some of her neighbors. So he and Eicher left town. They left the children. They were going on like a trip or a vacation, and they left the children with the family nurse, Elizabeth Abernathy, while they went away. Abernathy received a letter that was supposed to be from Iker, saying that Pearson would come to collect the children to come and join them. When he got there, he sent one of the children to the bank to withdraw money, but the bank refused because they said the signature didn't match. Well, it was his signature, not hers, so that would be why.
That would be the reasoning.
Pearson told the neighbors he was taking the kids and their mom on a trip to Europe. And nobody who listens to us will be surprised to learn they were never heard from again. Next, he began romancing Dorothy Pressler Lemke from Massachusetts, who was divorced. He also found her through a Lonely Hearts ad. He showed up on her doorstep and said he was going to whisk her off to his home in Iowa, where he would marry her. Although he did make time to withdraw $4,000 from 2 different banks before they left. Unfortunately, she didn't notice that her bags were shipped to West Virginia, care of Cornelius Pearson. Dorothy was also never heard from again. So police finally began searching for Iker and her children, and that's when they discovered Harry emptying out her house. They found correspondence between Iker and Harry, which led them to his home in the ironically named Quiet Dell, where he lived with his wife. They quickly found the crime scene inside 4 soundproof rooms located under his garage. I didn't even know then how you would make it, but anyway, how you would soundproof a room back then. They found hair, they found a burned bank book, they found bloody clothing, and a child's bloody footprint. Because this was and still is a very small town, a lot of bystanders gathered at the crime scene to watch the investigation unfold. I mean, we've talked about in the past, people used to just walk through the house where a crime had been committed and take things as souvenirs. Yeah. So this was a little bit further on in law enforcement development, so they weren't allowed to do that. But yeah, they're all gathered and watching it as the police are investigating. So a 15-year-old boy volunteered the information that he had recently helped Harry dig a ditch on the property and was happy to show the police where. So there they discovered the remains of Iker, her children, and Lemke. Iker and her 2 daughters and Lemke had all been strangled. Lemke still had a belt around her neck. And Iker's son died of head injuries. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay. In Harry's car, police found love letters between Harry and the 2 women, in addition to correspondence with other women that he had been planning to swindle and murder. In his house, they found more letters, and the number I read was over 100 women. I want to say it was like 118 women that he was in contact with, actively in contact with, and leading on. How did he find time to write letters to 100?
That's all he did.
Did his wife not notice? How is he paying for postage?
Maybe she thought he was writing a novel.
There's an idea for okay. Right. Anyway, after he was taken into custody, Harry did suffer some physical injuries on his way to questioning when he fell down the stairs. I have no sympathy whatsoever. The police roughed him up. He was nicknamed the Bluebeard of Quiet Dell. Police learned that he had been incarcerated under his birth name 10 years earlier for burglary. On September 20th, 1931, a lynch mob of approximately 5,000 people tried to remove Harry from the jail cell to administer what they believed was justice. The local fire department was called to help disperse the crowd, but the crowd pulled the hoses off the trucks, so they couldn't be used to hose them down. Wow. So they used tear gas. But some of the mob reportedly picked up the canisters and hurled them back at the police. Even though they were open and spewing, they just picked them up and chucked them back. These were some angry people. Let's see. Tear gas permeated the downtown area for hours afterward. After that, they moved him to a state penitentiary because they couldn't protect him there. They held his trial in an opera house because it was the only place big enough locally to hold all the spectators. Mm-hmm. After a 5-day trial, he was found guilty. When he was hanged on March 18th of 1932 in front of 42 official witnesses. Everybody wanted to be there. One of the jurors was there. The judge was there. All these people. It had some of the people listed. And it said there was almost a carnival atmosphere outside the prison. People crowded around the prison gates, even though the way it was set up, you couldn't see the gallows from outside the prison. Cars lined the streets. He's in Moundsville now. So cars lined the streets between like downtown Moundsville and the prison so people could walk up and cheer, I guess. And I did see a couple of different references. The case and the trial got nationwide attention while this was going on, quite possibly because this was during the Great Depression. And people wanted something sensational to read about to forget about the fact that they had no money or no food. So from Wikipedia, although not charged, Powers was suspected of involvement in the 1928 disappearance of Dudley C. Wade, who was a carpet sweeper salesman with whom he had once worked, and the unsolved murder of a Jane Doe in Morris, Illinois. On his deathbed, he wrote a letter confessing that there were other murders, but none were ever proven. Also, he professed his undying love for Luella until the day he died. He was leading all these women on, but that was the one true love of his life, he said, and he stuck with that story and never, I'm like, that's okay. But an additional interesting note for anybody who's a movie buff, Davis Grubb's 1953 novel, The Night of the Hunter, and its 1955 film adaptation and 1991 TV adaptation were based on these crimes, with the preacher Harry Powell being the character inspired by Powers. Preacher was played by Robert Mitchum in the film and Richard Chamberlain in the TV movie. And Jane Ann Phillips wrote a novel called Quiet Dell, which also examined the Powers case. Again, that just came out in 2013. Because really, this little quiet, let's go with dumpy looking little man is able to just capture the hearts of all these women. Although I maintain he had to have done most of it through writing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't his presence. It was his charm, but it was his written charm, not his.
Maybe he should have written some novels.
I would much rather he ended up as a novelist than a murderer.
A serial killer.
That would have been much better. So my sources for this, and now I want to go back. Have you seen the movie? I've heard of it.
What's it called?
Night of the Hunter. With Robert Mitchum.
You know what's funny is I have that on my list to try and find. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen it yet for my Christmas. I'm doing a Christmas challenge and everybody was watching, Christmas movies. And I've been trying to find a Christmas horror film for each one.
Oh.
Every day of the month, yeah.
Nice.
Uh-huh.
I'm assuming you've watched Krampus.
Well, yeah. I've been trying to find new ones too. But of course there were ones that I was like, well, this one fits and I'm just going to watch it.
Okay. That sounds reasonable. Anyhow, my sources were Wikipedia, Uncovered.com, Serial Killer Central, and the West Virginia Gazette.
All right.
And there were, I know we've talked about, besides Mothman, we talked about the Sodder children who disappeared. I saw several books on their disappearance, and I was like, well, we've already talked about that.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to do it again. So.
Yeah, but that one's a big one. It's one of the more popular unsolved mysteries.
It is. Nobody knows. So what are you going to talk about today?
I'm going to be talking about the Blood Countess, also known as Countess Dracula. So, to start, we're going to set the scene. Picture this.
Sicily.
You enter a Hungarian castle and stumble across a horrific sight. The mutilated bodies of young women fill its rooms. Pale and shrunken, they have been drained of all their blood. Slipping through their bodily fluids, you search from room to room until you come upon the mistress of the house, a countess, who, along with her most loyal servants, is draining a woman's body into a tub, the corpse hanging from the ceiling like a side of butchered meat. The countess is in the tub, bathing exquisitely in viscous red blood. The better to keep her youthful looks.
Well, that's a vivid image.
There we go. This is the story we've heard of Elizabeth Bathory through the years, but the bathing in blood portion was invented about 100 years after her death.
Aha!
In the first written version of her story, this was in a book about Hungary written in 1744 by a Jesuit priest named Laszlo Taroshi, who was given this information by locals, none of whom had probably even met her or been around during her time because the lifespans were not that long at the time.
No matter what you were bathing in.
That's right. While some have said she was an innocent victim of slander and attempt to take over her sizable territories, it's likely the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Elizabeth, or Erzabeth, but I'm going to go by the anglicized Elizabeth, was born in 1560 to a wealthy and powerful family in Hungary who owned Exid Castle. I'm sure I'm going to butcher some things. I was going to look them up, and after a while there were too many words, and I just had to give up. Her parents were a baron and a baroness, both apparently Bathories, who were related to nobles such as voivodes, who were the highest-ranking Transylvanian officials in existence at the time. For the record, Vlad the Impaler was a voivode. Voivode, however it's said. As well as the Grand Duke of Lithuania, the King of Poland, a Prince of Transylvania, and a Judge Royal of Hungary. These were their relations.
Wow.
Elizabeth was highly educated and knew 4 languages: Hungarian, German, Greek, and Latin. She likely never wanted for anything. The fact that she was a Calvinist Protestant will come into play later. Sometime between the age of 11 and 13, she became engaged to Count Ferenc Nadasdy in a political deal, and on May 8th, 1575, the 15-year-old Elizabeth married the 18-year-old Ferenc. Together they had 4 children through the years. Despite him being away fighting the Ottoman Turks much of the time, ultimately becoming the chief commander, at least one report says he enjoyed teaching her new ways of torturing the servants, including tying a girl down, pouring honey on her, and watching while the insects ate away at her because she had done something wrong.
Ew.
While her husband was away at war, Elizabeth managed their various holdings, including property, money, and people. Because, of course, as the Countess, the people were your responsibility in that area. In addition to providing needs to the village, she was expected to command defenders against possible attacks. So her husband's off fighting the Ottoman Empire, right? And she's still at home having to prepare in case those... Really, if you watch Game of Thrones, you know all about how that works. She's still actually technically kind of commanding a force. Many of their properties were close to the border between Royal Hungary and Ottoman-occupied Hungary, and thus in constant danger. When her husband died in 1604 of an unknown illness that had started with unbearable pain in his legs and progressed to him being fully debilitated, Elizabeth moved into the castle he'd gifted to her originally. We're going to call it Kastis.
Okay.
Located in modern-day Slovakia. Man, there was so much, like, historical shit I could fall into with this.
Yep.
Like, it's so complicated. By now, her children were all married off and out of the house. Her husband left behind instructions for Georgi Thurzo to watch over her. There had been some complaints in the 2 years before his death that Elizabeth was abusing her servants. A Lutheran minister named Istvan Magyari had complained about her in Vienna court, but the atrocities apparently escalated after her husband's death, possibly due to the stresses of running everything in a world still at war. Her mistake here was that she had started harming members of the lesser gentry, not just servants, who no one cared about. Everybody abused their servants then. Gentry would send their daughters to train in Elizabeth's gynoecium. I had to look it up. I was like, what? Gynoecium is definitely related to women. Sure enough, it's the Greek term for an area set aside for women in a home or building.
Okay.
So, like, within the castle, she had this particular area that was her domain and her domain only, and that was the gynoecium. They were supposed to learn etiquette of the time, right? So these young women would be sent to live with her to learn etiquette from her and help out, however.
And to learn how to be members of society, to learn how to speak to your masters. And
Instead, Elizabeth is said to have been torturing them in various ways, such as burning them, shoving needles under their nails, forcing them into ice baths in winter, whipping them with stinging nettles, biting them, and cutting their faces. And unlike before, there was a real body count now, though it is said that there might have been a few that were killed off when her husband was around too. And it was pointed out that her biting tended to be on the breasts. And she would burn their privates. So they were like, there was a sexual element or a jealousy element or something.
There's something going on here.
King Matthias II of Hungary, who, by the way, it was like, he had a lot of titles. I was like, I'm not going to put these in here. He wasn't just a king. He was like the ruler of the Ottoman Empire at the time. Launched an investigation in 1610, putting none other than Georgi Thurzo, the Palatine appointed by the king, and the man who was supposed to be looking after Elizabeth, their husband trusted, in charge of her investigation.
But okay. Impartiality was not a thing.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Thorzo appointed 2 notaries to collect evidence, and between March and October, they managed to get 52 statements from witnesses about the carnage coming from the castle. It was said that the servants would clean up after and dispose of the bodies, often hiding them in graveyards where no one would be surprised at a fresh grave or ditching them elsewhere. The notaries continued in their duties through 1611 when they had over 300 witness statements against Elizabeth.
Damn.
She was aware of the investigation and started trying to cover her tracks. She showed up in court, and we're talking, as far as I am aware, because when they spoke of court, it was like a king's court. It was like the court at Vienna. Anyway, she showed up in court with a villager whose daughter's death had been blamed on Elizabeth. The villager said her daughter had died of natural causes. She didn't win over any fans by crashing court in this way. She also served tea to Thorzo because they were acquainted and tried to convince him that she hadn't done anything and that it was one of the girls she'd taken in who had dispatched with the other girls. He didn't believe her. It should be mentioned here that King Matthias had borrowed increasingly large sums of money from Elizabeth's husband when he was still alive, and she had appeared in his court multiple times to ask for repayment since her husband's death, and he had never repaid, and he was tired of her bugging him for the money that he owed her. In addition, her cousin Gabor, or Gabriel, Bathory, held a lot of power in royal Hungary as the Prince of Transylvania and stood to move against Matthias, who ruled the Western Ottoman-controlled portion of Hungary. Gabriel had aspirations to unite Transylvania and royal Hungary, which would bring him even more power. Her 2 sons-in-law were also conspiring against her, wanting their share of the Bathory and Nadazzi holdings without waiting for their mother-in-law to die. They were actively working with Thorzo against her. Finally, remember I mentioned she was Protestant?
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of nobles in Hungary were Catholic as well as the king, and they were inching toward the 30 Years' War, where Catholics tried to stomp out the Protestants. Both Elizabeth and her husband were Protestant, and their holdings were significant enough that they were considered a threat to lead a revolt. So these are the political things coming into play, and the reason people are like, maybe she didn't do anything, maybe this was all political. Again, I feel it's a mix of both, most likely. Knowing her time had come, Elizabeth wrote her will to split out her holdings to her various family members and put into play various things that meant her being taken down, but not give her properties and power to Matthias. She was not stupid. She kept in contact with Gabriel in hopes he could do something to help her as well. She had been financing him and had promised him troops, but he'd have to defend her if he wanted them. At the same time as all this was going down, Thorzo had been trying to negotiate with Gabriel to establish a treaty with Matthias, but he couldn't be breached as long as Elizabeth was supporting him, so they had another type of incentive to get rid of Elizabeth. What this all boils down to is that with her standing, Elizabeth would have been allowed to continue doing whatever she wanted had the powers that be not needed her to go down for them. They didn't really care too much about the gentry girls either. Like, they were lower gentry. So it gave them firm ground to stand on to remove her from power, though. They were like, okay, like, we're all doing weird shit like this. Go ahead and read the Marquis de Sade and tell me that these people, like people in power, haven't long been abusing and harming other people. Elizabeth went out with one of her daughters one last time before her arrest on December 31st, 1612. Thurzo stated that he'd found her in the act. Like, he wrote his wife a letter. I caught her in the act. But it's widely felt that she was actually eating dinner when he burst in. There was a dead girl on the property. There was a dead girl. And one that was severely injured. She was confined to the dungeons of her own castle. 4 of her servants were arrested as accomplices, with the living victim stating that, yes, Elizabeth had heard her, but a specific servant had done the most damaging things. But yeah, so the girl was like, no, she beats me. Yeah, everybody was beating their servants. That wasn't even considered a weird thing if you were the servant. But she had those 4 super trusted servants, and it was one of them that she said that had cut her skin and had done all I know, there was something about her arm basically being destroyed, her hand and arm.
Ugh.
Elizabeth insisted on a trial, which Matthias had also originally wanted as well, but Thorzo convinced Matthias that Elizabeth going down would impact all the nobles in Hungary, and that a trial would be a big deal and really bring too much attention to it, so it would be better to take her down more quietly than that. Also, it would have required Parliament to bring her to trial, an act of Parliament at that time to bring a noble to trial. They couldn't just be taken to court willy-nilly. Or anybody who was unhappy would do it, right? Like, he pushed They still should have been able to, but he pushed to put her in a convent, but when the alleged body count kept climbing, he realized that wouldn't be good enough. That wouldn't be safe. Instead, she was never tried, never had her day in court, and spent the rest of her life in her castle. Some claim she was walled up in a single room with openings left to send in food and such, but historians seem to be coming around thinking she actually probably had the run of her castle, but she was guarded, so she couldn't leave it. So there's a lot of mixed information out there, of course. This has happened a long time ago, and how it was documented was blown up in all kinds of ways. Of course, Matthias was also forgiven his debts as part of that deal, too.
Oh, what a shocker.
Thorzo's wife also benefited from receiving Elizabeth jewelry.
Oh.
Now, something else I haven't mentioned is the fact that all of those witness statements, only 2 people actually saw an injured girl in person, and only one of those saw her act upon that girl. The rest of the witness testimonies, which were released many years later, they were made publicly available, were mostly servants of neighboring properties who were reporting the things someone else had told them. Servants talk, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Some witnesses had heard cries of pain from the gynoecium, but they'd never seen anything either. Nobody was allowed into that. It was her inner sanctum except for her most trusted people. A doctor would be called to the castle, but said he never saw marks on the women and was just treating sick girls. But at the same time, since they were just sick girls, they were fully clothed, and all he could really see were their faces and their hands. Elizabeth's servants, the 4 who were considered accomplices, were tortured until they talked, with stories turning from knowing nothing to blaming each other and to finally blaming Elizabeth. The girl who was found alive in the castle during Elizabeth's arrest and who had stated one of the servants had brutalized her, not Elizabeth, changed her story later and said it had been Elizabeth. Interestingly, Thorzo had secured her a small farm, some crops, and 50 guilders. Not a payoff at all.
No, that wouldn't be why she changed her whole story.
The servants were put to death after their trials. 2 of them had their fingers torn out with pincers taken from a fire and were then burned alive. A young male servant was treated slightly better because they felt he'd likely been in their control because he was much younger. So officials just had him beheaded. And the 4th servant, who had initially gotten away, was caught, and then they were burned alive as well. On August 13th, 1614, Elizabeth went to her guard and said her fingers were cold. He told her she'd be fine and to go to bed, and she did. The next morning, she was found dead in her bed. Her body count has been put as high as 650, though this was from a witness felt to be unable to read, yet who claimed to have seen a journal Elizabeth kept that named all her victims and listed how many there had been. But she couldn't read, but she could. The journal was never found. It's felt more likely that,
likely that it didn't exist in the first place?
It's felt more likely that her victim numbers numbered in the 20s.
Okay.
But there's been all the way up to like 50, 60, still not 300, and But she is officially listed as the most prolific female serial killer in history and possibly the most prolific serial killer of any gender in history. But with all the information on this one, I find it doubtful. However, I also don't think she's an innocent victim. That's a weird thing to make up about women, because at that point they didn't think women could do terrible things like that. And so I feel like something was going down. However, me not thinking she's a completely innocent victim who was taken down by the patriarchy does put me at odds with a lot of feminists and a handful of historians. I just think she would have been allowed to continue some aberrant behavior if there wasn't also a political and financial angle for a bunch of men around her. So was she still the victim of the patriarchy? Absolutely. The old boys club, they banded together. They came after her. I just don't think she was as pure as the driven snow. No. And that she was likely a cruel woman, because it had been talked about for a while. It had been documented, and it was pointed out that there weren't as many complaints as there should have been for that. There's also no documentation on how many girls were actually missing. Mm-hmm.
Well, because what were the years?
It's back in was it the 1600s or 1700s? Yeah. 1600s.
1600s.
And late 1500s.
Yes, they were keeping records, but it was not everything was written down. And who knows where they were tracking them and how they could have been lost or destroyed.
I think there was a lot of mocked up evidence against her. I think that the witness statements were stupid because it was all hearsay. There were 2 valid witnesses, perhaps. But they paraded, in the end, those 300-something witnesses through there.
Does it say?
But she didn't even get a trial, so it didn't matter.
Did it say where they got the idea that she was bathing in the blood of
It's that priest. It's just
virgins.
100 years later in the same region that had Vlad the Impaler before. And that was what, like 100 years before her, or 200? I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but it hadn't been significantly before, but it wasn't recent. I think that they had to live in the shadow of the castle, and that there was also a lot of vampire hysteria around at the time. So that was just another natural thing. And again, there was a feminist stance on it that was, well, since they didn't believe that women could do these terrible things, of course, the only reason a woman could is because she wanted to be pretty. I mean, look at Snow White's stepmother.
Who wanted to be the fairest in the land. That's
right. And so that's a thing that they'll attribute to women. And no, she was just a cruel bitch who had nothing better to do, who had a stressful, existence because they were in the middle of a war and she was running all of their local stuff, and their holdings weren't just what she could see with her eyes. She wasn't Yertle the Turtle. They were extensive. There was always the possibility that they would be invaded by the Turks, right? And so she would take it out on her servants. That's my opinion. Now, they originally buried her in the church, and then people got upset about it, so they supposedly moved her body back to Exid, where she was born, but now nobody knows where she's really buried. So my sources were, the most useful one was historycollection.com, also National Geographic, and I want to point out, I actually had 2 National Geographics. One was the UK and one was the US, and they were slightly different, and the UK one was way more out there, and which was interesting. So I just threw that in there. And, of course, I did look at Wikipedia, and I also looked up Vlad the Impaler, so I should have written down the dates, because I wanted to see if he was interesting to do, but it was all warfare shit. Oh, like, if I wanted to cover, if this were a history podcast of violent history, I'd cover it, but honestly, other than being terrible and impaling people on sticks, including, they pointed out that there were some that were found where the infant was impaled on top of the mother. Oh. And there was a donkey that was impaled because when its owners were impaled, the donkey brayed, and so he had the poor donkey impaled. Like he was a sick fuck. Yes. And there's a lot, and it's interesting if you're into history, but I don't think it would be a compelling, unless I could get more into the Dracula part. And there's really not. By the way, Dracul was something like that. Dracul was his dad's nickname, and I forget the term they were using for that. It wasn't just nickname, and often those nicknames would be passed down, and it actually meant dragon. Yes, that I knew. Okay, so I found interesting facts, but not enough for me to be able to try and wade through. He was in power 3 different times. Yeah, removed from power, back in power, removed from power, back in power, killed during a battle where it's thought he was possibly mistaken for a Turk, because he would dress up as the opposing force sometimes, and they think maybe his own people, there were so many of them, they didn't recognize him. But then the other story was that somebody snuck into the camp, a killer, and took him out, like, in the middle of the night or something. But he didn't seem like the type that would have an unguarded camp at night, so I almost believe the other one more. Yeah. But it was super complicated historical stuff. Fascinating, I'm certain. And I was looking through it, and I was like, what did this place become? You kind of feel compelled to look at a map. Yes. And even just with her story, there was a lot more I could go into. It's sort of like, what was this? What's this now? Oh, Slovakia. Okay. It's just fascinating how much all of that had to have changed for so long. And I did take Western Civ. It's been a while, but it can only go into the overarching stuff. There's no way each of these tiny little, when you look up Vlad, it's huge entry even on Wikipedia, and it's just, all right, he had to do this, and this is why this, and he was taken prisoner when his dad was in power, because as a kid he was an illegitimate child. And I'm like, I'm reading through this stuff, and I'm totally seeing places George R. Martin mined for his stories, because I'm like, this sounds oddly familiar. The illegitimate child that comes to power, except for Jon Snow was actually a decent human and Vlad was not. But there's a lot of stuff that I'm like, you read history, I see you. Yeah, he had to have for what he did. That's where you get your ideas. Yes, and they're rich for it, because these people were just killing each other all the time, and the political machinations happening behind it, also fascinating and complicated and ridiculous. And I'm just like, maybe if you didn't feel the need to keep conquering people, you wouldn't have to be at war all the time.
Perhaps. But no, you had to keep growing. You had to control as much as you could and be as big as you could.
It's ridiculous. All right.
The Elon Musks of their time.
Jesus.
And we did get in a fuck the patriarchy.
We did.
It's just not a podcast if we don't get to say that.
All right. Thank you for listening.
And don't forget, starting next month, we will be coming out once a month on the 15th of each month.
That's right.
It will be exciting.
That's proper marketing. Don't commit to anything.
It'll be huge.
An extravaganza of
That's right.
Talking.
There will be fireworks and and cocktails
and will there? Okay.
In my
You've been
imagination, there will. I didn't say where. I mean,
okay.
They can't.
We watched them. You don't get to see them.
I was gonna say
it's
they
a podcast, not a TV show.
I'm sure we could put in some sound effects of things blowing up. I know who you're married to.
It's true. I know we could. It would be a low power LED and it would be fine.
Soon I'm going to get the opportunity to play with some nail guns. Very excited. It's research for a story, but I'm very excited about it.
Just go outside and ask Jeffrey.
I am ridiculously excited. Yes, It's somebody else who has nail.
Right.
Like, what kind do you want? And I said, I have a question. If I just said to you, could I borrow a nail gun? What would your response be? And this person was like, sure. I was like, God damn, don't people realize?
You should have given me nail guns.
You should not give me, power tools of any sort. But, all right, we will talk to you all next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.